you guys as well for joining me, my lovely players, to not play Dungeons and Dragons, but instead to talk about Dungeons and Dragons for a while and talk about Chapter 1 and then talk about Chapter 2 and that kind of thing, and answer questions from the community because we got some through, I believe. I think Hillary's going to be handling that, is that right?
We have 18 questions.
Ooh.
Whoa. Okay, that's a lot. We could maybe field some of those after we go through kind of a general, how do you feel about how your character's been kind of progressing through this act is probably the starter question for us when we, when we go around and kind of say, you know, if your character now was to meet your character at the start, what would that look like, and that kind of thing. So, in our usual order, we're going to go around from Monty all the way around to Hillary in like a U shape. And Monty, what do you think's changed most about Asterisk?
I think the obvious answer is memory. But I think what comes with that, and what has especially been sort of the change that was intentional with Asterisk, has been her personality developing, you know, going from literally a blank slate, like trying to play her as like bland as possible, to now she's kind of got an attitude to her and makes remarks that are a little bit cutting sometimes, and she's grown beyond just sort of mimicking her party members and what they have to offer.
Yeah, you were kind of a dick to Juniper last session.
Good. Good.
Just like kind of out of nowhere, which was definitely some of Astra's attitude is very interesting to see now. And if you were to have them meet old Asterisk and new Asterisk, do you think old Asterisk would have new Asterisk would have anything to say to old Asterisk?
You know, I don't think, like, if it was like a travel back in time situation, if I had any advice to do anything better, I don't think that Asterisk would have any advice, because, like, she sees everything that she's gone through as like a necessary part of the process to getting to where she is. And like discovering herself isn't something that like she wouldn't prefer to just be told who she is and what's going through it. It's better that she went through everything and now knows who she is rather than what she was.
That's really poignant. It's really nice. I like that. I love that for Asterisk. I can already tell that some people are going to have different answers for that. Well, it's just going to be like, your fucking god's a fake. Like, but our next up is Emma and lovely Cassia. What do you think's changed most about Cassia? Obviously the bad rules haven't changed.
Honestly, the most that's changed about Cass is probably just the way she handles herself in general. I mean, when she started out, she was very unsure about everything, and now she's definitely, especially with Wunngrenad being in danger so much, definitely stepping into a more sure of herself role, and like, she's here to protect her home, and she's much more confident in herself.
I think we've definitely seen that with Cassia. Lots more confidence is really nice to see in our favourite little rogue. And if you, as old Cassia, were going back to talk to brand new... Wait, I keep mixing these up because like new is now. Right, if you were to go back and talk to the old Cassia as the now Cassia, what would you say?
Not a lot of words, I think. She's not very good with them, but definitely just reassurance that it'll be tough, but she'll get through it. And to trust her gut and things.
You know, you've got a lovely found family that you found here, but it's also quite sad that you're currently having that fight with Finn, which we're going to be starting Chapter 2. I think that's a very interesting place to start Chapter 2 with this kind of long-lasting character in Wunngrenad finally having his arc ended. Thank you very much, Cassia. Next up is our favourite gunslinger, Nikki playing Luca Ramonti. What do you think's the biggest change about Luca, Nikki?
The biggest change is interesting with Luca because I think a lot of Luca's growth has been fairly internal. Um, Something I was very aware of throughout most of the game so far is that uh, like most of my characters, Luca plays things very close to the chest. Obviously, Luca was kind of the last person to spill the beans about what was going on with them. Um, and there are lots of little things that have changed. Like I think I've mentioned before, I intended Luca to be a bit harsher of a character and someone that was a bit more morally ambiguous. Um, because I liked the idea that he was largely motivated by achieving his goals and that he wasn't as concerned with how he got there. And that faded pretty quickly because I ended up in a party that was so nice that it was hard to maintain. So I think in that sense, Luca probably went into his adventuring career with a lot of ideas about what a man should be like and how like the heroes that he read about acted and how he should act in that regard. And I think they were soon disbanded as ideas because I think the people that he found himself caring for and aligning with uh were not the same as the people from his stories. And the people that most resembled them were largely cruel and callous people that we ended up killing. So I think Luca has learned to, at least to his personal extent, probably not even close to the level of the rest of the party, but soften up a significant amount.
Honestly, you kind of nailed it on the head because I do agree that it was very hard to keep up any kind of harsh exterior in this group of very soft, mushy characters. And it's very interesting what you say as well about like meeting other people who kind of embody these ideals of the people that you see in books. You know, you might see that in people like Prid, who you guys didn't really like that much, but it's probably more of the kind of person that you might see as like the hero of an action novel. And I think he's also kind of been rubbed off by the party a little bit, and not how I wanted to phrase that. It is now a little bit more soft. Oh God. Anyway, if now Luca was to go back to old Luca, what would you say?
Um, I think he'd probably want to tell himself to trust the journey and to bear in mind that even though his goals are important, the short term, the people around him, the things he's experiencing are important as well, in a way that I don't think he recognized for a long time.
That's very gooey. I like that. Very sweet, and also, you know, I've been loving kind of a home away from a home feel with Luca in Wunngrenad, and that kind of budding relationship with Koru as well. Not that kind of relationship, but father son kind of relationship is very nice to see. Sorry, I've got a little fly in my room. Thank you very much, Luca, Nikki, and Luca. Last but certainly not least of our GUI party members is Willa. Hillary playing Willa. What do you think's changed most about Willa?
Definitely her doubt and her ability to sort of make her own choices, which was very like the point of Willa. Sort of starting out her adventure, she was always very like waiting for what everyone else was going to do, sort of following around and just playing the support role. I mean, I think back on our first session where we had like these two religious figures that were very obviously aligned with Willa, and instead of questioning why like they were there or why they were hurting them, she just went along with what she had been asked to do. And she was very like easily influenced early campaign, very just go with the flow, kind of do what everyone else wants. And then she was sort of forced to realize that her god and the person that she always thought would tell her what to do was dead and now replaced by someone who really doesn't know what they're doing, just like her. And she was almost forced into that role of mentor, where she is now kind of caring for Tyvain and trying to get him to follow the alignment that she thinks her faith should go along with, and in a sense, sort of redefining what her faith is for her entire community and home. Sort of, especially with seeing Baru and Prid in our last session and talking to them about how she wasn't ready for that responsibility, but now sort of coming to terms with she can't wait for someone to tell her when she's going to be ready. She just has to make whatever decision she thinks is right and trust herself to execute that on the ideals that she holds close to her heart.
I find it super interesting that as the cut of the party that has been closest to the gods, there's really only one of you that is like god focused, and it's been kind of a hectic ride of you doing a fantastic job at playing this believer that is kind of doubting faith, while having characters like Varu and stuff that are perhaps more stubborn in their faith than Willa has been. Willa's been a lot more flexible, and I've really enjoyed seeing Willa adapt and improve in that way. But if you were to go back to God, well, it wouldn't even be start of the campaign Willa. It might be back when Willa was a little ranger and seeing Solar die in that cave. But anyway, if you were to go back to slightly younger Willa and tell her something, what would you say?
That's the thing, is I don't think that older Willa, with how everyone has always told her what to do, I don't think she would feel that she should tell her younger self anything. I think that she would know that she was going to get there and that she had to figure it out, based off of sort of all of Eleni's wisdom that she gave her, the small symbols from Solar that she got her whole life but ignored. Like, Willa knows that she can't give herself just a definitive answer, because the person that she is and the faith that she's made for herself is defined by the struggle that she's gone through in order to find it.
Again, just very beautiful, and I can imagine all of you just like popping out from a portal, and then all of you kind of turn to each other and be like, "Actually, I don't really have anything I want to say here. Should we'll just leave then?" Maybe then we'll go back and we'll wreck on that.
All our past selves are really pissed because even our future selves don't tell us anything.
They're like, "Oh God, we must become gods because we don't tell anybody anything."
Because we're assholes.
And I think that's a good time to jump into a couple of questions before we jump into recapping what happened in the last session, or the last chapter. My God. We've got a whole, 5 months left of playing, 5 or 6 months, so, and then it will be over, and we'll have to move on to something else. Something that might be set in a circus. That's the current that I've written, is that it's set in a circus, so, lots of fun. But should we do some questions, Hillary?
Yeah. Alright. Question 1 is from Elle, and it's for everyone. And this is a hard, Elle came into this forum hard. Is there anything your character has done in the campaign that they or you regret?
Oh, that is a hard one. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who would like to volunteer to be first? I can tell you what some of the NPCs regret things. Cedric probably regrets, hanging out with you guys.
I think a lot of people regret hanging out with us.
That one bartender in the Underdark regrets trusting you guys because that didn't work out well for him at all. But yeah, what about you guys?
I can just answer really quickly because I don't think Astris has really many regrets at all, just because it's hard to remember things. I think in general, Astris kind of regrets bringing everyone to Missouri and sort of endangering them in that sense. She's like, I probably could have done that by myself and been fine. People didn't need to go and face all that, so yeah.
That was a lot.
Yeah, I think Willa's is very similar. Like the big first choice that she ever made was to go into that vault in Kapofu, and that ended in Cassia dying, and Willa like meeting her god and learning all of these things that were very traumatic for Willa. And I think in a way she does regret going in there as soon as we did, sort of just rushing in blindly. Um, yeah, I think that's the big one. That and probably choosing Prid as the chosen one and abandoning sort of her people in order to go do what Tyvain had told her to.
Yeah, Pred was not ready for that kind of responsibility. He's doing a lot better now, but he really had to grow into that role, both in height and in maturity, because now he's a much taller werewolf, and we love that for Pred. You got any for us, Nikki?
I mean, the vault's a pretty big one. Um, so like obviously as a player, I knew what an insane risk going to fight a beholder was. I've run beholders, I know how ridiculous they are. Um, for Luca in character, obviously he knew roughly what a beholder was, but I think he was very much still in the mindset of he was willing to take risks because in his mind the cost would always fall on himself. And in our approach to the battle, Luca had himself up front and he was trying to get in the way of anything. And uh, I think what he kind of learned after that was that one way or the other, if he is going to be traveling with a group, his decisions are going to reflect on them. And it's all very well and good for him to be blasé about his own life, but other people shouldn't be put in the same position just because he is. Um, and I think if he'd considered it more, it wasn't this like quest for truth as much for him as it was for just the desperate need to hunt out more so that he could stop feeling like he was so in the dark. I think it led to a lot of good things for the party, but it also really fucked with us, and it led to a lot of bad things. Jax died largely because of that. Luca has a lot of regrets in that regard. Um, I can't think of any other major ones because the the main other decision that Luca made was absolutely correct in killing Lance Erman. And I will now, regardless of how many terrible consequences occurred from it, I will always prefer the Outlaws as our on the run family trying to escape from tyranny than whatever indentured servitude he was trying to inflict upon us.
Yeah, that did kind of flip the campaign on its head, but overall, definitely worth it, I think. It just ended up with you guys going the exact opposite way around the map.
Yeah.
We were going to go that way. And I don't think it's really... I think that thematically, it's changed a lot. You guys are now the revolutionaries, and that's really cool. Very glad you guys didn't end up on the capitalist side. I actually don't think with this group of players that was possible. So
Was you
We were
happy?
never getting that out of us. No.
there was no way I could have played that where like halfway through the campaign you'd turn around and be like, "Are we the bad guys?" Because the whole time you'd be going, "Are we? What the fuck is this?" And finally here, Cassia.
I wouldn't say it would be full regret, but she definitely feels guilt over kind of taking the fight home. Wunngrenad has been through a lot since she came back from Port Malar, and just she's constantly worrying about it, and she does feel that guilt because Koru's been affected by it, and so have all her friends and everyone else she's grown up with and known since she was a baby. So that, but I wouldn't necessarily call it regret because she sees how it's going and what it's going to turn into with all their effort, and she likes that outcome. So
Good. I'm surprised no one mentioned Gregaria. I thought Gregaria would be some level of regret for you guys. Of she was
Saying that.
she was pretty evil like for the whole time that you guys knew her. And I love Gregaria.
It was heavily implied to us that she was far too powerful to take on, and we were just like, if she's killing the other bad guys and she's playing nice with everyone, we should probably just leave it. Like, Luca in character did want to deal with it, but I, as a player, didn't.
Yeah, probably the right decision overall, and definitely led to an interesting story. But that budding friendship didn't go so well, and now we're still dealing with the consequences of Gregaria's actions, which is very fun. As well as having war on the horizon, which is a greatly interesting development that we're probably going to talk about a bit more in this recap episode. But we're also going to start actually recapping what happened in the session. In the campaigns, sorry. And I thought maybe we could do like a little character recap of what's happened to the characters, and then I'll do a little story recap of what happened in the story. And I think that would be a good way to kind of sum everything up. We will. I say we will. I'm hoping that we'll do some character intros that will hold some of this stuff for chapter 2, so we can have them all in like a little playlist of character intros, like nothing like a minute or 2 minute long, But for right now, take as much time as you want to go through what's happened to your character. And this time we'll just go the exact opposite way, and we'll start with Willa.
Cool. So yeah, Willa started out as in contrast to Luca, like very open. I mean, she met the party and was basically told them her whole life story on the carriage ride to Howleth, which was just that she had grown up in Indara under the mentorship of Eleni Agla, who was this very elderly, sage-like figure among the Hunter Supreme, which is the Church of Indara. And Willa was just out in the world for the first time. She had sort of had this feeling that she couldn't explain, that something was wrong with her god, Solar. And in that way, adventure had led her to Port Malar, where she met the party. And they all hopped in a little carriage to Howleth and fought some werewolves, which was concerning considering the connection to her god. But that was sort of the first connection she had with Tyvane, where in this cave, there was a gem that had gone missing, stolen by Vandish Vandren, who was working for someone by the name of Lance Ermin. And Willa sort of got this message where she knew that Solar was telling her that this gem was important. And instead of reaching out to that, she turned away from it and left with the party to go to Port Malar, which is where we killed Lance Ermin, which was fun and determined pretty much the rest of our campaign. But we did get the gem back, and as soon as Willa touched it, she got this message from who she assumed was Solar still. And she was confused and stubborn and didn't want to go, but eventually sort of brought it back to the place we had been in Howleth, to this cave and sacred space, and put it in and talked to Tyvane for the first time, who basically gave her all her memories back, told her what was going on, and then, because of the code of the gods, took those away again and made her forget everything. So now Willa is sort of in the opposite sense out in the world and has a new feeling in that everything is sort of fine with her god and she just needs to check up on a few religious locations. Also got a cool glow stick from the guy. So then we head to Indara, which is where Willa is from, where we noticed some cult happenings, and Willa was sort of very confused by all of the blood and fired cult stuff going on. But she found some more stuff that alluded to Solar and her teachings over the years, different shrines that had been desecrated by these cults. And eventually we made our way into Indara, where Willa talked to the new Hunter Supreme, who had changed while she was off sort of doing her own adventure thing. And Willa was just very confused as to why everything had changed. She couldn't find anyone who had the same markings under her eyes, which is the mark of Solar that she was born with. And it was just like weird and strange. And eventually, through sort of snooping around the church and talking to both Willa talked to the Hunter Supreme, Luca talked to some old creepy dude, and Cassia snuck around the church and poked in some places and found a fun blood altar to who we presume would be Silgoth. And after that, we had to flee from Indara, and Willa was so upset. She didn't know what to do. Her whole life got ripped out from under her, and she was out yelling at the moon and like, Solar, what the heck's going on? When she was met by these werewolves and all of these people who had her markings who had seemingly left Indara. And when she talked to them, they were basically like, yeah, Willa, you're the chosen one. And Willa was like, I really don't think so. And if I am, I'm not ready for that. So she made the decision to leave that responsibility with Prid, who already seemed to be think he was the chosen one and was displaying a lot of leadership within this camp. And to Willa, who's much younger than Prid, when she saw someone like that, someone who was the ability to make choices and knew what they were doing, she was like, well, if he already knows how to make choices and he doesn't doubt as much as I do, then it makes sense that he should be in charge. So she left that with Prid and went off to explore the trail to Wunngrenad, which along the way she stumbled upon the cave where 20 years ago, she, as a younger acolyte, just after Eleni had passed away, encountered Solar herself and Silgoth, and Solar had been killed in front of her, which Willa didn't know at the time, but she revisited that cave. And then we were off to Wunngrenad, which was very hunky-dory and cute town time with the found family. And the next big thing was pretty much the Beholder fight, and the interactions we had in Kapofu with Willa, sort of meeting all these drow and being looked at weird, met with a lot of hostility in terms of Solar, which she was confused by, sort of had to dig through the dark, quite literally, dig through the Underdark, in order to find the answers she was looking for, which is when she fought the Beholder, was petrified. I cried a lot. And then met Tyvain, and Tyvain told her what was going on, and was like, all right, you're my chosen one. You have to stay here with me. And Willa was like, no, I don't want to be a god. I don't want to stay up here. I have stuff to do down there. I'm not ready. I don't want this. This isn't for me. And through what I believe the power of her party praying for her was brought back to Genathan. A little more sparkly than usual. She got some new armor. And that's when Willis sort of took a step from questioning and instead was more still questioning, but not in the sense of blind questioning, but more looking for the answers and knowing that, yes, her doubt was right, but at the same time, feeling unsatisfied by the answer she had been given. Which is when Willa really started to learn to read from Luca, talked with Asterisk about the feelings she was feeling, a lot of fear, having someone to confide in an Asterisk, sort of leaning on Cassia as this person that shouldered a lot of things and didn't really need to talk about them, but simply got up again after being knocked down. And that's when we entered Missouri, and Willa really started to read and find these answers and form this idea of what she thought her faith could be through individual choice, and really countered a lot of people who would tell her, like, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. And her just saying, well, if my God is all powerful, then why wouldn't he use that to be good? And just sort of always being this driving force of wanting to see good in the world, being able to forgive, and finally having the confidence to make her own choices in order to ensure those things do happen. And now we're back in Wunngrenad and about to fight a war, and I think Willa still wants to forgive Finn. and that's where she's at.
Thank you very much for that very in-depth look at Willa. It's very interesting seeing things through your eyes that I've only ever seen through my eyes, and kind of the way that you have your character motivations is great. I really love the Indara part. Can't wait to see that with the other campaign, and well, also more of it with you guys as well. But I love my little star child. She's adorable. Just the sweetest. Which means that next up is Luca Ramonte, our little gunslinger.
Oh boy. We didn't start with a gun.
No, you didn't.
Luca started off just taking a job in Port Millar because he needed some extra money. He'd used up a lot of what he'd saved to travel in the first place. And taking odd jobs seemed like the kind of thing adventurers did. And what he ran into kind of seemed like what he'd been expecting to when he headed out. Strange darkness and danger. And he threw himself at it without much concern. Because that was just what he believed he had to do at the time. That all kind of ran into a hitch when he realized that because of this larger problem that they'd run into with this missing item and this arcane power, he was going to be sticking with these people for a while and he was going to be getting to know them. He did that. He let himself relax a bit and be as part of a group. Port Millar was somewhat familiar to Luca from his upbringing. It had a similar vibe to the Ruby City. So he felt largely in his element there. And when he ran into the Lance Ermine issue and the threats that were put in place, I think in his mind, Lance not only was standing for a threat at the present moment, but was standing for all of the authority figures in the Ruby City that had rejected him and denied him for so long and had tried to push him into a box. And that anger and the anger at the threat to him and his new friends all came out as he drew the new gun he'd been given by Jax, and we struck down Lance Ermine. I don't think he left home planning to be a fugitive from the law, but I think in some way when he decided to leave the Ruby City, not continue to seek a path within it, Luca knew that he wasn't going to go home again for a long time. I just don't know how literal that was in his mind at the time. We started running. There was lots of divine bullshit going on, which Luca was not a fan of, because Luca is largely concerned with things that he can lay his hands on and understand the mechanisms of, and gods seem absolutely antithetical to everything he values. And he said as much to Tyvain before he had his memory blanked. We carried on after that meeting to Indara, a place where the gods are very important. Luca had visions. A fae fucked with him. We ran into cult bullshit. Luca was not a fan of any of this. And I think he was, at this point, continuing to think of himself as this kind of individualistic stalwart, bastion against these strange arcane evils of the world that he was running into. That lasted until we got to Wunngrenad. And it was about that time and finding an actually welcoming community in a way that none he'd ever been in had been before, that Luca started to consider that maybe the way he was fighting against these things that he'd hated his whole life was itself a construction of the things that he hated, the life he'd lived in the Ruby City, and from then on. There is really nothing that helps you deal with your toxic masculinity better than only hanging out with women all the time. Luca got to know the people of Wunngrenad, got to understand the society a bit better, a society where everyone wasn't always trying to get something out of each other, but things were just offered freely. And when that place was put into threat by whatever lay in the crypt, he was more than happy to go and deal with it. vampires were the sort of thing that he had always heard stories about destroying, and it was a no-brainer to take out Sire when we ran into him. What lay beneath and this strange temple was back to this dark, ethereal thing that Luca did not really want to have to face. And it came to a head when we ran into a fiend who wanted to steal Asterisk's face. And even though Asterisk was not particularly concerned about this, Luca had read a lot of stories about fiends. And for the first time on his quest, Luca chose protecting his friends over his own goal and gave up something very important to him. The book about the blood magic that he'd been using up to that point. So he gave up finding any more secrets from that ancient tome as they continued. Ended up in the Underdark because they fought a crazy fucked up dragon thing. And lost Cedric, which was outside of a group that had largely roundly ignored them and mocked them and had been foolhardy enough to walk off to their deaths in Howlif. The first death that was probably on his hands, and I don't know that he really knew how to deal with that beyond push on and try and find a way back to safety with everyone else. We ended up in Kapofu, another place where the society was cloistered and clearly hiding something, another place where the hierarchies seemed deeply unfair. And when we were given the chance, even an incredibly dangerous chance, to fight back against that, Luca was eager to take it, especially as it seemed to align with what he at least believed Willa needed to push forward on her own path. We raided the vault. We ran into a lot of different folk, made some decisions, took some losses, and in the end, we found some of the secrets that we were looking for and got hurt real bad. Returning without Willa led Luca to not really know what to do next, and it was only when another obvious enemy to be vanquished, something straightforward, was put in front of him that he was able to act. And it was that evening, as he was looking up at the stars, that Luca, for the first time, decided to trust something as ethereal and bullshit as his own feelings and faith, and seek out his friend again. After that, we were back together, and ready to continue trying to protect our little home. And we continued running to God's bullshit. A woman came out of a box, a crypt, and she was ancient in some way and probably held many secrets, but clearly had more to offer to Asterisk's own path. Luca ended up being pushed into the role of captain aboard a ship, and sailing for the first time under his own power rather than being sailed around. And kind of continued to get back into that storybook feel, especially when we fought a kraken. That was definitely the most like the stories he'd read that Luke had ever been. Missouro was a place that Luke at first felt deeply uncomfortable being around all these strange machines who had clearly had some influence from the culture he'd been from, and clearly had the same servility to the lower classes that he'd seen elsewhere. Until we found out that there were revolutionaries there, and Luca was like, a narrative, excellent, I can hop into this. And being offered a fight was what he wanted. He took it up willingly, because he, in the end, prioritized, because of his past decision, protecting his friends. He ended up losing another. We were not able to save our ally Felix. But after raiding yet another vault and learning yet more dark secrets of another city, we were able to escape, and Luca had the most powerful weapon he's ever held. And at that point, returning home to find everyone in Wunngrenad calling us heroes and the leaders of this revolution, Luca felt ready to take up that mantle, not in a prideful way like he might have before, but in a way that understood the duty that was suggested in that. And I think now, as we face a threat that at one time Luca would have dealt with very bluntly, but clearly has an emotional nature to it that Luca's learned to be more attuned to, I think he's ready to try and use the lessons that he's built up over this journey and try and meet the expectations that everyone around him have built of him, half off of his actual actions and half off of all his bluster about how capable he might or might not be.
Thank you very much for that, Nikki. Amazing seeing into Luca's mindset as well. Again, something I didn't really have much thought of when kind of going through the story. Luca's changed a lot, I think. Personally, I've really grown into a leadership role, even though you kind of already had it in the group. You've kind of grown into it a lot. Big boots,
Yeah.
big red boots to fill, as it were.
I think he went from being the kind of person that just assumed that leadership was expected of him to being someone that expected it of himself, which I think is a different kind of nature to that station, because one of them suggests that he's just kind of assumed that power is what he's meant to have, and one of them is accepting that that's not fun, that's a job, that's work, that is effort that you put in to protect people.
We're going to break up this talk about characters, and I'm going to talk a bit about the world and the recap of the world before we go on to our next two characters. So I want to do this in a way that you guys haven't seen, so you guys get a bit of insight into how the world works. And we're going to be talking a bit about why the things that happen in the world happen, rather than just this is what happened. So, obviously the party all met in Port Millar, and it's a very strange geopolitical landscape right now in Genathan, where the Ruby City is becoming very industrialized and sharing that wealth with Missouro, Brim, and to a lesser extent Port Millar, while over the other side of the world in Indara and Wunngrenad there is this abundance of resources and a very high amount of magic, but less industrial capabilities. You tend to find the people that live out that way are like artificers and engineers, and people who live out this way are like druids and stuff. So that's kind of the geopolitical landscape at the moment, and it's only now recently that trades have started to happen between Wunngrenad and the Ruby City, and also between, say, the Ruby City and Kapofu and the Underdark, because these places are being realised and starting to get traded to. The most important thing that happens in that early part is that Willa leaves the church, and the main daughter of Eleni is now gone from the church, and plans get kicked into motion in Dara, and things start to change there. Well, you guys are off doing your stuff in Port Millar. Revolutions are happening in Indara, not the good kinds of revolutions, cult revolutions, and that's kind of what you guys are going back to there. Then you guys kill Lance Ermine, and that's a huge moment for the Ruby City, because that gets back to the Ruby City a couple of weeks later, and that becomes this massive thing for a wanted poster all across the world, and probably the first of its kind in that way because of now the interconnectedness of the world. Yeah. Yeah. But it also becomes a good excuse for the Ruby City to start gearing up for war, because they can come over with the intents of hitting down rebellions and dealing with naysayers and assassinations, while also going to get resources and stuff like that. Like America going to get oil, as it were. So that's happening at that side of the world, while you guys are heading off to the west. In the background, there's a whole bunch of god bullshit happening. Tyvane's struggling to be Tyvane, and Silgoth is very aware of this and has been gearing up for the past 20 years for big god fight. And so this is one of the main steps, is building up the cult, and now the cult is set up in Indara. Then you guys meet Trite. God, I love Trite. Trey's dead now. Gets stabbed a whole bunch by a cult, which I really think was the main moment when you guys went, "Oh fuck, he will actually kill us," and I was like, "Yep, I'll do it. I'll kill you guys." But yeah, rip Trey. And then we went to my favourite place so far, which would be Wunngrenad. I mean, Ruby City's my baby, but Wunngrenad is fantastic. And, you know, there was a lot that went on in Wunngrenad. The land was split in twain. You know, that was because of the dragon happened. But because of your actions in Kapofu, that kind of led to Kapofu starting to militarize as well. Because, oh fuck, we lost our crown. It's time for us to start heading back out into the world and claiming land for ourselves. So that's going to be coming up in chapter 2. And during this time you guys met Koru, and you know, they're old but strong adventurers who have done a lot with their lives, and they're also involved in god bullshit because, you know, the world is filled with god bullshit. Bagdan's been asleep for god knows how long, but Koru knew where to find him, so they've been visiting, and you guys, you know, with the went to see the Frog King. The Frog King's death was actually far more important than it seemed to be in the story, because the Frog King was perhaps not the biggest fan of Juniper, at the time the Lord of Spring, but now the Lord of Summer and Spring, and him dying was a great excuse to get Namor, the Oak King, into that post, who is a much bigger fan of Juniper, and you could probably say is actually just a vassal of Juniper and Wunngrenad to allow his power to stretch over to there. Then you guys left, because Finn did a whole bunch of bullshit, and you guys were like, screw this place. So you guys went across to Missouri to search out Astra's backstory, and you met the Aquarius Strike Team, or briefly saw the Aquarius Strike Team, who were hunting down Krakens and heading towards the Mesa. Another really big part of the story that we'll probably get to, or we might not, who knows. That might just be something really important that happens in the background, and the most important thing I think to take away from all this is that there's always stuff happening in the background, and your actions aren't the only actions that are happening in the world. Missouri was super interesting because it was our first time where both parties were in the same place at once, and your actions were influencing what they were doing, and their actions were influencing, well, not so much what you were doing as much as your allies dying. So rest in peace Felix, and also kind of rest in peace the Revolution, as it was unfortunately raided by the Prime Guards, or Prime Cops as I like to call them, with their little sirens on their heads. But Missouri was pretty interesting for me, because it gave me a chance to be kind of wacky with the body horror stuff. Lots of tongues on people. Leatherface is a fantastic villain, I think, with this horrible face that he has to spritz to keep moist is just awful, and I love it. And that's parties, on other parties seen a lot more of that, but it also led us to kind of Meridia and Astris being sisters, and what that means for, well, what that means for the world, I guess, is important. But the most important thing was the fight between Silgoth and Tyvain. I think that's been the most important part of the entire adventure so far, and really where the story starts coming out a little bit. And you guys did fantastically in that. Managed to save Tyvain from not dying, or managed to save Tyvain from dying, and you know, he rewards you with many gifts, which is very nice. And now you guys are back in Wunngrenad and about to fight the war that might go your way, might not, but I guess we'll have to see. Does any of that seem crazy to you guys? Any of that unexpected? No? Okay, perfect. Then we'll move on to the next character one. Our next character is going to be Cassia. Emma, could you lead us off with Cassia?
Of course. So starting out in Port Malar was kind of a big thing to Cass at the time, because she was just this little farm girl in Wunngrenad for so long, and back home, she kind of considered either just it's you and the earth and that kind of magic that came with it is basically all she knew. She didn't really consider the gods that much and everything that went with it and all this chaos that's going on behind the scenes. So kind of following in her parents' footsteps a bit more than she realized, but doing it anyway. She wanted to travel and get out, see the world. So getting to Port Malar was kind of her first step of independence, and it's very quickly turned into the Outlaws, which she was not ready for, but she wouldn't have it any other way at this point. Accepting the job from Vandris to deal with Haleth in its entirety, she was more thankful for being in a bigger group than she let off. She was very much out of her element. She's done kind of like hunts before and such. I mean, you gotta kind of do it to survive here and there. But never in a sense of all this purple magic and the different aspects of what the werewolves were doing. So, again, she's very out of her element, and she kind of put off this air that she was just like, okay, what's next kind of thing, but very deep down, I think it's shown through at least a little bit that she was just this ball of anxiety for a while. And then moving on to Indara, it just added on more god stuff and cult stuff, which just kept getting worse until she hit back home. And with killing Lance and hearing bits and pieces of what she couldn't necessarily remember from meeting with Tyvain for that split second in the cave and having these bounty hunters after her, she was definitely just looking for the only sense of security that she could think of at that point, which was Wunngrenad, Koru, her family and friends from back home. With being on the run with this ragtag group that she acquired, she wanted to share that as much as she could because all of us were kind of out of our element at the point. So definitely just getting back home, she was worried that she was taking the fight back, but knew that they were capable. So that was kind of a sigh of relief for that split second we had before we started dealing with vampires and dragons and cataclysmic things happening all the time. At that point, it was very much of a this might as well happen in her mindset for a while, and it kind of still is. Just more and more stuff gets piled on her plate, and she's like, well, I have to deal with it because people I love are in danger, and can't have that. Gotta just get through it. What'll be, will be. Pick up your bootstraps and let's do this. Heading down and fighting the dragon and then losing Cedric was a bit of a punch in the face. Like, at this point, it was all very surreal and just kind of too out of this world for her. And then the moment that death truly became a reality was a lot. And it was the start of the turning point for her, entering into the Underdark and losing Cedric and having to try and figure out a way to bring him back. And then the definite turning point was the Beholder fight and the uncertainty that came with that, because she understood and saw how much it meant to Willa and saw that Luca was backing her up in this, and she wanted to be there for her friends. She knew that this was such a big deal for her and her faith and everything. And that's been the main struggle for them so far, is Willa dealing with her god stuff, and she wanted to help because that's what she does. She helps. She helps as much as she can. So going into this fight, it was very much of a, as selfless as she could. She definitely considered stepping away. But she kind of internalized that for her friends at that point. And seeing Willa in the fight get petrified and then immediately dying and experiencing death in its whole, and then coming back and having to continue this fight and still having Willa petrified, it was very much of a swiping the feet out from under her. I mean, it was from waking up after dying and then getting out of the vault into the Wunngrenad woods and just being there without Willa. It was just like a haze. Like, she could definitely consider it to this day more of like a bad dream at that point. Because, I mean, that point from waking up to getting Willa back, so much happened. They went to Sire's castle. She found her dad next to death for the first time. And just everything was crumbling all at once, and she couldn't, like, get that out of her system. She couldn't, like, breathe for such a long time. So that definitely sparked that. We need to get shit done. We need to get it done as soon as possible so that we can just rest. And that's where the I'm tired stuff came from, our poor little Tief. But, that was probably the lowest she's been that night. But then, the power of friendship, we got Willa back. She healed Koru to the best of her ability at the point, for the first time. And that spark of hope kind of ignited again. She got her family back, and at that point, she was pretty much concerned that she's like, alright, everything's good. I got my dad, he's not dead, my best friend's back, we're safe, we're breathing, we're good, it's fine. And then, you know, we get back home. There's a giant hole in the ground. She can't necessarily deal with that. She can't fix it. She just wants to fix it. She wants everyone to be safe. And just kind of like Luca, she wanted to take head in this whole thing because this is her home, and she kind of showed up, brought her friends back, and then everything started going wrong, so she felt this responsibility for it, and she still does. And it's less now of a guilty responsibility, like, oops, I fucked up, I have to fix it, to more of a, yes, we fucked up, we have to fix it, but also, this is my home, I'm standing up for it, this was probably going to happen either way, we just kind of jump-started it, so let's get this done. And with Gregaria and Finn, it was another reality check in a sense. A lot of the time that we were just hanging around Wunngrenad, it was very much of the buffer time. She's like, okay, I'm home, we're not away in a crypt, we're not dealing with demons, like, we're just, this is our breather. And then that was kind of like her safe space, but then that was detrimented by Gregaria and how she manipulated Finn. And loss of another friend just led her more further into the, we gotta get this over with, we have to finish this kind of thing. And going to Missouro had the same sort of, like, helping nerve for Asterisk as the same thing as the crypt or the vault was for Willa, Astris didn't know anything about herself. She barely remembered anything. She's just pretty much going off the past few weeks that she's been with the group, and having the sense of Cassie's nostalgia with her home and how she saw her friends reacted to being in Wunngrenad. She wanted to reinstall that in Asterisk, and that was a big point in why she was so adamant that we went to Missouri and found out more about Asterisk and her background. And there was a little bit of hope that maybe they were a bit more on our side, which it turned out that they kind of were underground, but no. At least more so than Indara, because they have their own bullshit to deal with. Missouri is basically morally, at the moment, an opposite of Wunngrenad. So with the different levels of just everything, really, just the somehow poverty line with barely like a currency, and it's just she felt the need to fix that as well, understood that there was other things at play and that it was something that she'd have to walk away from, which was harder. But at the point, she was like, our main goal that we showed up with was to find out things about Asterisk and her background, and that's what we're going to do. And then if we can fix things in this process, we'll do it. At this point, that's our main thing. We already have so much on our plate, so we can't add more. We're just going to overwhelm ourselves. So even though learning more about Asterisk turned out to be stirring the pot even worse, she considers the Missouri run, even with the vault and unfortunately losing Felix, kind of success in a sense. Like at this point, things are not good there. They're not fixed, but they didn't necessarily fail, and that's good on her mind. She is counting, especially the vault, she is counting that we had no casualties, we were good, we made it out alive. Like, sure, Leatherface is like breathing down our necks again, but we're good. Like, no one died, so thumbs up, everybody. But now we're back home, and where we're gonna pick off dealing with Finn is just so much of this colossal problem for her, because this is her childhood friend, this is who she grew up with, and she definitely wants that chance of saving him, but she really cannot tell if there is that chance, and she wants to keep believing that he is still in there, like she can help him, the group can bring him back. I mean, they've done such wondrous things so far. Why would this specific thing that seems so minuscule to some things like fighting gods in the middle of a desert, why would this be the one thing they can't do? So she's kind of getting a bit of a big head to their capabilities, but she's still very unsure about it. And then the war and that little blip with Aram was just a lot of emotional turmoil for her, because it again brings it back to everything that she considers home is starting to get shaken up again, and she holds so dearly to that security of it that she definitely needs something to go right. So this war better go good, or yeah, consider it her villain origin story. But not really.
I'm a lot like Joker. This is your Joker arc. Thank you very much, Emma. Again, I mean, you're kind of the one with like the happy background, as far as like family and stuff went, and I think we've seen a lot of that in Wunngrenad as being like the safe space for the party, and having the dad figures in Zuli and Koru, and now Orim is there as kind of a brother figure, since he managed to escape that owlbear nest after getting cloned by a Rakshasa. Good for Orim. I love that for Orm. And hopefully you guys can persuade Finn, because having a bit some more allies in this war would definitely not go amiss. Anyway, our next up is the wonderful Monty, who plays Asterisk. Do you want to take it away, Monty?
Um, I think Asterisk is a very interesting character where we find her at the start of our story because um, she is essentially running on little to no memories. We find her in Port Malar, essentially like wandering through the woods and stumbling across humanity for the first time, sort of like experiencing and seeing people that oddly remind her of herself. And she really just blindly sort of joins this group as she sees people stepping forward and does not really understand what's going on, but volunteers herself regardless. Um, and really for like that whole arc you're seeing sort of a shell of Asterisk just sort of on autopilot, letting like the senses sort of wash over her as she doesn't really know what's going on or who she is, um until like the moment where we do get to stumbling through the town going back to Port Malar after that mission. She runs into a little girl and has a moment of interaction with this child, her like childlike innocence, figuring out what like a scheme and a con is, and like learning what a lie is in that moment. As well at the same moment misunderstanding by chance what a bird is and thinking that it's a cloud, and that a cloud is a bird, um, and that pursuit of knowledge, trying to get in with the pirates, and then when encountering the pirates, and from there on out, sort of like stumbling into several like Triton figures and being somehow like subconsciously drawn to them, naturally walking over to the Triton group, naturally sort of picking out Trity as our guide out of the other carriage drivers nearby. Um, Early on she's just sort of like blindly stumbling into things where she sees herself and relates to that, until we obviously kill Mr. Irvin, and that moment sort of brings her to the front of her own mind where she begins to analyze everything that she's seeing instead of just absorbing it. And she takes off with the party on the run, knowing that there's danger following her, as they go through the woods, and she begins to take in more and more, sort of like seeing new things that she hasn't seen before, is very excited by the world, up until sort of the death of Trity, um, and seeing a friend pass away and beginning to start to think about mortality and stuff. She sort of like shuts down uh, after we get into Indara, to do a system update to sort of evaluate the things that have been going on in the past few days, and she comes back a little bit spunkier than she was before, having processed some of these events, learned from not only her fellow party members but also those who she's encountered along the way. Um, and Indara was sort of a fun one. As we left the city, she began to get to interact with the werewolf sect a little bit, getting to see their inner workings, understanding this sort of like concept of home and family, where they were all interdependent on each other, and beginning to see that sort of forming amongst her and her friends as they're traveling throughout the world. Then meeting Gregaria and having this sort of interaction where she gets along with a person who has ill will to her, and this begins sort of the blurring of the line for Asterisk as to what an enemy and a friend is, not understanding that some people can be kind to you with ill intent. And that continues on through to Wunngrenad as we make our way there. She learns is incorrect, but she stumbles into this sort of like matter of fact in her mind where, you know, flesh beings are a little bit weird and their bones and bloods are secret, and all these misconceptions she begins to gather along the way about like how humanity works and what is normal for people, and then gets to Wunngrenad, and at this point has sort of become kind of a killing machine, where is super nice and friendly, but sort of the minute any of her friends switch on, she is down to kill. Straight up murks a capitalist in a theater. Just, you know, kind of going from a very innocent, childlike being into this streamlined killing beast. And then again in Wunngrenad, continuing to develop that familial sense amongst her friends. until we happen to stumble into a dungeon where there's a lot of sort of mental puzzles, which frustrates and confuses Asterisk as she does not necessarily have the facilities or the background to understand what is going on there and sort of the philosophical things about life, all coming to fruition with, again, us fighting this vampire named Sire, where he has charmed her and, again, just further blurs the boundaries of what is a friend and what is an enemy. And he continues to try and manipulate her. And then they fall into the Underdark, uh, where she is confronted with this big heist mission where she's just sort of blindly following again, and having that end so terribly with one of her friends dying, another being paralyzed and brought to the stars. Um, and that sort of begins the journey of Asterisk being frustrated at the fact that she has power, and yet feels like she's not being heard, like her voice has not necessarily been taken into account. She's more or less just a tool to sort of everyone around her, and wanting to establish sort of more of a real connection and not understanding what that entails. So when she gets back up onto the surface after the beholder has been slayed, trying to go out and form those real relationships with the people in Wunngrenad as well as her party, and then just really sincerely missing Willa, finds Sire again, and in sort of a power trip, tries to, have one over on Sire, who had emotionally manipulated her for so long, puts him in her head, carries him around for a little bit, kind of bullying him, power trip, and then brings Willa back from the stars by taking a page out of Willa's book and what she's learned from Willa and praying to Willa to bring her back. I think that's where sort of the journey with the questioning of faith comes from, where she sees Willa's relationship to the gods and doesn't understand it and is sort of blindly stumbling at it again. From there, going from Wunngrenad across the sea. Oh wait, actually we found Meridia first. Mm-hmm. So we went to a cavern where we battled Gregaria. Gregaria died. And Asterisk also died for the first time. And she has, at this point, begun to have memories come back to her, memories that she can actually feel in and feel an immense amount of pain. And as she's grappling with so many things all at once, just turmoil within her, constant fear, the replaying memory of pain, she encounters Meridia, who is summoned out of like a box, essentially, underground, and sees herself within Meridia, and immediately starts to take on the sort of parental role that her party had taken on with her early on, where trying to transition this person who knows next to nothing and is very fragile into a state of being strong and able to carry their own, despite Meridia being so much larger and so much older than her. She really took that compassion and then was confronted with a moment where Meridia revealed that, a bird was in fact not a cloud, but a bird. And having that sort of shake Asterisk as to, like, people can lie to you, and it's not necessarily ill-intentioned, but things get misconstrued. And now Asterisk sort of doesn't quite know what information to trust that is within her own head, and begins to doubt her own memories. And then we head across the ocean with Meridia, where on the sea, Asterisk again sort of encounters more and more memories of her home that we are heading towards, as she almost sort of dreads going home, knowing that she is in fact defective and left for a reason, having one of the few memories that she started with being that initial fear of needing to run away, but wanting to understand more as to why she needed to run away. So we show up in Missouro, and we're greeted quite warmly. There's no issues, which honestly surprises Asterisk, because she thinks that she's going to have to deal with a lot more, and that people would be kind of mad at her immediately. So she's pleasantly surprised, enjoys her time in the city, and then we come across a secret resistance And the people within here, Professor Jones specifically, is sort of able to shed some light on Asteris, revealing that she's over 600 years old, is the second, technically third Warforged ever made, and she has likely been probably erasing her memory for the last 600 years for some reason, but we don't quite know why, and that the ethical quandary of understanding where her soul came from before she was made into a Warforged, we begin to reveal that Asteris was a Triton prior to this, and was likely around the age of 15 when she was put into the body. Asteris has a vivid memory as she touches sort of the magical goo from the ley lines, and regains that memory of clutching at her mother's hand, and then feeling, through Luca, feeling the gut-wrenching pain of having her like soul and bones drilled into to have her soul extracted and put into this body by Leatherface and a strange glowing woman with a clipboard. So beyond that, she's sort of begun to settle into this body, and just kind of begun to roll with the punches as she's like, well, it can't get weirder than this, I guess. And then we stumble into the Beholder, the Beholder's lair in the vault, and Asteris begins to be called a bunch of things, sort of by the Robeholder, and then sequentially Leatherface, including Narissa and My Queen, things like that, where Asteris again has sort of begun to doubt the things that are being said to her and does not understand necessarily what's going on, and feels frustration at the fact that if I am a queen, clearly no one has regarded me with my power as much, and sort of that frustration going into there. And then immediately fleeing after seeing Leatherface and being just horribly afraid about who he is, what he's done to her, and what he could potentially do to her friends. So we flee back to Wunngrenad, and there's a war going on, of course. The god battles, again, just sort of desensitize Asteris a little bit more to being open to talk to the gods. Now sort of making like a fun thing where Asteris is like, I could just talk to any god. It's not a big deal. They're not that far away from me. So then sort of like the last thing that she has done is she took the chance to reach out to both the Reliquary, who answered and told Asteris that they made her, and then to reach out to Azure, who called her a soul sister, and she's just sort of begun to question everything that everyone is telling her, and not necessarily understanding who she is or where she comes from, but having literally a boatload of information now to process. So yeah, where we find her now, starting like next session, is really just sort of this Asteris who, again, is frustrated at the amount of power she has, and yet her voice is still not being heard very well, and not understanding any of the information that she's been given. Yeah.
I think that's just a D&D campaign, that last sentence at the end there. Just not understanding any information that's been given so far. Thank you very much, Lamonti. Asteris is a very interesting character, in my opinion, and you gave me a lot of free reign of what to do with Asterisk, but I think really you kind of brought the character to life a lot, even when you're a little empty vessel. It was it was perfectly done. I'm very excited to see where that goes, especially now that you've got Meridia around. Ellery, shall we do some questions?
Yeah. Our second one is just for me, actually.
Oh.
It's also from Al. But it's, what custom baked goods would you make for a party member? And I actually thought of this beforehand because I could see the questions. So first with Cass is the easiest. It would definitely be like a cinnamon roll, which is just like the epitome of like home and like that comfy home feeling, filling the whole house with the scent of cinnamon. And I feel like Willow would put like a little less of the ice topping on it and would make sure that like she always serves it with just freshly picked blackberries for that extra little hint of Wunngrenad in it. Um, I think that Asterisk obviously cannot eat baked goods, but if Willa had to pick one for her, I think it would just be ice cream. Like that child, like sweet, like sitting on the back porch with your friends and eating it as a kid. Like Asterisk is very sisterly to Willa, and I think that their relationship is just so simple and sweet and like to the point, and that ice cream is very encapsulating of that. And Luca, I think that Willow would go with something very. I think she would make Luca like cakes, very sweet cakes, like a boatload of sugar, where it's so sweet that you're eating it and you're like, this is not good for me, but it just tastes so good, and you're shoveling it. Just the most sugary, like guilty pleasure cakes that she could make. Yeah, that's what I think she would
Amazing.
make for all of you.
A very sweet question there.
And then right.
That was a pun.
Our next one, oh,
You know,
it's for everyone. Which is, how has the party changed you for the better?
I assume that means your
assuming that they have.
characters.
Yes.
Sure. Why don't we start with Monty and go back around?
Yeah, I mean, for the better, you guys have really shaped sort of Asterisk as she is as a person, versus Nerissa. Like, I think she's very different. I don't really know Nerissa, but I can tell you that Asterisk is formed out of like her love for all of you, based on your interactions with her, learning and taking parts of you that she adored and sort of incorporating those into how she functions as a person. So I think the party was really vital to Asterisk's creation and where she is now.
Emma?
With Cass, the party has definitely been just the epitome of home away from home. I mean, each individual has given her another little piece of her personality as she's evolved. She's the baby of the family, so having Willa and Asterisk has kind of let her take on kind of an older sibling role while still keeping the security of Luca being the older sibling in this whole thing, but also having the dynamic with him as well of being like, we not necessarily are more seasoned, but have to kind of be the stronger shoulders for these two, because Asterisk has the knowledge and mentality when we met her of a literal child, and Willa was clouded by the church for so long that she also had that childhood innocence that I think both Cass and Luca had, that like, we must protect this as at all costs kind of thing. So it kind of let her grow with herself, as well as being able to emotionally grow with each of them in her individual ways.
Yeah, I love that. Nikki?
I think as I mentioned about Luca changing over the campaign, I think he has softened up a lot. I think there's a part of kind of the kind of guy Luca is that wants to be almost robotic, wants to just think of oneself as a purely efficient machine for achieving things, and it is good to have people who care about you enough to remind you that you are mortal and that you have to also take care of yourself and value yourself enough to take care of yourself. Luca's learned self-care. Yeah, I think that the main thing is, I think they've humbled him a bit too. I think that he was so ready to just kind of throw himself into the grinder and see what came out. And I think having people that he has to look out for is itself reminded him that he is a person he needs to look out for. Yeah, I think he's still a very self-destructive person in a lot of ways, but I think he's significantly less so than he started out.
That's always good. And last but definitely not least here, Hillary.
Yeah, I think Willa learned a lot of like her individuality from her party. It was the first time that Willa was in a group of people who didn't talk down to her, and people who would actually look at her and be like, "No, like, what do you want? Like, you have to make the choice." And I think that Willa also defined like a lot of what she believes is good through her party. Like in all her life, she's sort of heard stories from Eleni about like what Solara was about and those tenets of her faith. And I think that throughout her journey, she's seen more of that goodness in her party than for God. And that's what sort of drove her to have this mentality that you can't control people, and you can't determine someone's fate. Um, but everyone can only make choices, and if they're wrong choices, all you can do is forgive. And if they're right, then that's how you chose for it to go.
Very poignant, indeed.
This one's for Monty, and or Asterisk. What is your favorite animal or creature you've encountered over the campaign?
Oh, that's such a good question. Monty's answer is, of course, horses. I think that was very fun. I always think horses are very fun to sort of play with. Asterisk, oh gosh. I think sort of the most interesting creature to Asterisk, like the biggest puzzle in her mind, is sort of the beholders that she's encountered, or the Gregories, as she calls them. Where it's sort of this big sort of question mark in her head. Like there's obviously information about them, but she just had like a very misconstrued sort of understanding of like what they are. And every time she's encountered them, they've been slightly different. So she's a little bit confused as to what's going on there. And I think that like that's where she's really like, oh, I'd love to learn more about that.
Wouldn't we all? I'll throw more beholders your guys' way so you can learn more about them.
Oh no, not more Gregories. This is another everyone one, but it's short too. It's just to sum up the campaign in 10 words or less. DM included. So Vinny, you go first. It's your campaign.
10 words or less. What even are gods?
Of course, that's what you'd say.
Yeah. I'm on brand at least. Should we start with you then, Hillary?
Sure. Probably for the campaign. I'm going to start now. Found family does their very best and loves each other.
Very cute.
See, I've gotten good at it with all this sending I do.
That spell was literally just practice for this part of the questions. Nikki, that means you're next.
Okay, I'm trying to see what I can do with this. 4 anarchists mock gods. Good capitalists. But former. Oh, what can I fit forwards? and trust and friendship. There you go.
Oh, what an ending. That's adorable. That means Emma, you're next.
Hmm. Nope, that's 11. Uh, Home amongst chaos.
I like that a lot. I give you the tagline. That's very nice. And last but not least, we've got Monty.
Tin can, butterfly, blood bag, and red ram walk into a bar.
The bar has since then burned down, unfortunately. Um,
Blood bag.
Yeah.
Wow.
Shai, I think that the Mesa could really be classified as what the hell just happened. Just BB in general could just be classified as what the hell just happened. And maybe I should make that the tagline for BB, especially since this weekend we're going for a modelling show, which will be very fun. What have we got next, Hillary?
Okay, this one is for Monty, and it's from me. If you had the choice of returning to a Warforged, but had to forget the party and all of your adventures thus far, would you?
Oh gosh, that's the question, isn't it?
It is.
I think that what that implies there is giving the chance to go back to being Nerissa. And as much as I, as a player, sort of crave for that fulfillment of my character to live out the rest of their life and experience like the rest of their childhood and what was lost and all that potential there, I don't think that Asteris at this given moment would choose that. She has lived for 600 years beyond that, and I think that she has shaped into a whole other person without those memories. And as painful and as vital as those are, and as desperately she wants to know them, I don't think that she would give up this body and the memories of her friends, because this is really like who she is now. Like, she's a whole separate person almost.
I love that, and I want to add something for it to it as the DM, if you guys don't mind. I love character decisions like that, where at the end of a long story, your character has, like, say, the chance to bring back their family and or get their last revenge, but actually the story all the way up to that has made them a person that doesn't want to do that. And I mean, Nikki will know from playing in my campaign before that oftentimes that is the case, where you go through this entirely long arc, and when you get to the end of it, you're just a completely different person that wouldn't even do the thing that you're looking for at the start of the arc. You know, we had Arkle in the last campaign go through the entire thing with wanting to save her people, but in the end, realizing that the only thing that could save her people was her abandoning her people and heading back to fight the Emperor, which is that's a whole thing. But yes, I definitely want to get more into the Nerissa stuff and what the hell Nerissa's been doing for 600 years. It's actually pretty interesting, so hopefully we get into that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your question, Hillary.
You're welcome. I've got another one from Elle. This one's for Nikki and Luca. Is being an adventurer everything you thought it?
Oh, in the sense that everything that he was told he would experience, he has in some form. But every aspect of it has been different than he thought it would be. So the composite parts are there. He's fought a beholder, he's fought a kraken, he has saved innocents, he has slain despots. But all of those were different experiences than he was told they would be. It turns out that slaying one bad guy does not destroy a system of oppression. It turns out that saving one group of people does not mean that you have not, in doing so, chosen to abandon another. Sometimes things end up complicated, and not as gung-ho and heroic and fun as he might have hoped. Um, I think is more than he thought it would be in a multitude of ways. And I think that he is grateful that that is the case because I think he's a more whole person to now be someone who has been built by his experiences and not built by what he was told they would be like, what stories told him they would be like.
A very well-rounded answer, in my opinion. Um, and yeah, I love this so much that I've decided kind of writing it is a great idea of writing like a short story from the Ruby City that maybe Luca has read, and I'm just being like, you know, this isn't this isn't how it was. I didn't get the girl. That kind of thing. So a great question there. Thank you, Elle.
Next one's for everyone, and I think we've kind of narrowed it down to two personally. But it's what is the most iconic moment of the campaign? Which personally, I think that it was that first Beholder fight, because that was like a big titular moment for all of our characters.
Luca yelling at Tyvane is probably one of my favorite things that have happened so far. I love it so much.
Yeah, I think that whole episode there with all the tensions, like things sort of, I think hitting a really big arc there and us having this moment of just like everything kind of exploding all at once, high stakes. It was fantastic to watch.
Yeah, I think obviously like that was a big moment for Luke as a character to kind of face down something that he'd felt so much against, but the funny thing for me is that that moment was so much predicated on not Luca but Luca's relationship to Willa and the fact that he had seen someone who reminded him in some ways of how he had once been and who spoke to him of all the multitude of ways that she was unappreciated by what she dedicated herself to. And I don't know, I think sometimes you accidentally, in the heat of moments, sum up things much better than you could if you were thinking about them. And I think telling Tyvane that he had to earn Willa was that kind of moment.
I'm gonna go against the grain here for a second. That was a fantastic moment, and definitely I think it sums up the party very well. That whole Beholder fight, and then that whole, so you know this side of the campaign, I think that sums that up very well. But for me, the sum up of the campaign and the story in general, the best moment, the iconic moment for that, was definitely the kind of surreal moment of you guys walking into Bagdan's home, and he's just getting changed and getting ready to go out and do his Blood Moon Reaper stuff. And that whole moment of you guys going, fuck, we have time to ask this guy questions and we have no clue what to do, was just like really encapsulated the story that I'm trying to tell here, and was a very good moment for me.
Yeah, us sitting silent there for like literally a solid few minutes. I'm just like, God, what do we even say? Like, we've talked to gods before, but what do we say?
You can literally see me going, do I interrupt at some point? This is a long silence. And just be like, okay.
We've
It was
gods.
so good.
We fought with gods for so long, repeatedly, and just argue. And the first chance we got of, okay, ask, we're like, well, we didn't think we'd get this far.
I think obviously
My
the
favorite
real.
part- Go ahead.
I was gonna say something stupid. You go.
Oh. My favorite part of that too is like the part after that where with Asterisk, like I tell Monty this is my favorite part like every day because I loved it so much, is Asterisk, to this character who has been ending every sentence with a questioning intonation, to look back at Bagdan and answer with a statement was so powerful and good, and I loved it for Asterisk so much. It was just such a good moment. And I do think that in turn did also encapsulate our party and sort of us questioning for so long that we finally did have time to ask. We were like, no, you need to realize that this is what is going on in the world because you obviously haven't been paying attention. It was beautiful, like,
Yeah.
wonderful
We didn't,
Monty. I loved
like,
it.
we didn't have a request. Our only request was, like, are you aware of what's going on? And I think that, yeah, that was a big character moment for Asterisk, where I had talked about, like, her not feeling heard, having all this power, not feeling heard, and her taking that moment of, like, okay, now you're listening. I don't have a question. I just want to tell you what I'm thinking about. Yeah.
And I love Bagdan as a character, and that moment was great. Because really, Bagdan does know, and he's really sad about it. You know, he's just this kind of like emotionally crippled little god, and I don't know. I love that whole episode was very very good. The god fight at the end was epic in nature, I suppose is probably the best way to put it. And you guys consistently impress me with the actions that you took.
Next is for Nikki and Luca from me, which is sort of what we've been talking about a lot with Luca's character. But do you think that Luca is the best leader for the party? And does Luca think someone else would do a better job at it? Because I know he gets like forced into it a lot. Like, has he ever been like maybe someone else?
Luca, I certainly at the start felt like he was the best leader for the party. He felt like all you guys were in way over your heads, and he'd read so many books about this shit, so he knew what he was doing. And that proved false when he started running into consequences of being a leader and what being a decision maker actually is. No, I don't think he's the best leader for the party. I think that anyone that has as much shit of their own to figure out as Luca does is not going to be a great leader because it's going to be so tainted by their own bullshit. But I think he also still has that instinct in him, which, whether it's right or wrong, that it's better for him to undertake having to make quick choices that he might regret than to put that onto one of his friends. So yeah, I don't know. I think Luca, and also like Luca just doesn't like being told what to do because that didn't go well for him historically. And I think having so much agency and having this whole journey be something that, good or bad, he has built for himself with his friends, is something that he does want, even if it's sometimes difficult.
Very good answer. I vote for Cedric for leader. He has a crippling alcohol and
No.
gambling addiction.
All your NPCs have a crippling alcohol addiction. Jack's dead, Cedric does.
Gunther has
I
something
know.
going on. Who knows what it is?
Gunther's all fucked up.
Cora doesn't drink much.
Yeah.
Maybe more
Cora's-
now that he's in a wheelchair,
yeah.
but you know, rough. Anyway, next question.
Yeah, this one is also from me. It's for Emma. It's a kicker. Are you ready?
Yeah, Freddy's all over me.
All right. If you could ask your mother one question and get a response, what would it be?
See, in me, Emma's mind, I have like, ooh, what can I say that's so emotionally devastating? But, like, how can I get an emotional response out of this? But, for Cass, she's definitely kind of accepted the fact that her mother is gone, but she's still, you know, in here kind of thing. She's been hearing so much about Elwyn being a part of her and such a big portion of her, that I think if she could have one question for Elwyn, yeah, probably just the basic, like, kind of like this child to mother, am I doing this right? Because, I mean, she lost her, so she doesn't have that necessarily motherly, maternal guidance anymore. I mean, she has this bunch of idiotic men that she somehow managed to corral, so she has kind of had to step into Elowin's place as well, so she kind of just wants that, am I doing good? Am I doing this right? Could I do it differently kind of thing.
It's very cute.
Aww. I love that. Alright, this one is from Seven, and they're asking, how have your characters changed or grown, particularly in ways you didn't expect to see happen over the course of the campaign? What's holding them back from more growth?
I think, we did go through a lot of this, but I still think it's interesting to go through what unusual changes you guys have been through, and, if you think anything is holding you back. I think that's very interesting to go through. So we'll go around the other way this time. We'll start with Monty.
God, I love you, Seven, if you're watching. They're gonna help me cut my hair on Friday. I'm very excited. I think that the most sort of unexpected thing with Asterisk, which I don't know why I didn't expect it, has been sort of like the trans allegory out of body experiences that I didn't quite think through when I made this character, but now in reflecting on it, it's a very big part of Asterisk's story of having a body that is your own but not necessarily your own, and having some dissonance between who you are inside and what is presented on the outside. So that has been a journey that I kind of didn't expect and was a little bit odd, but going through it makes perfect sense now.
Yeah, totally not something I had really planned either with the story.
Maybe you're muted.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was gonna say totally not something that I felt like I'd planned, or certainly not something I feel like I have any way to talk about. But it's been really interesting seeing that come through in Asterisk as well. Emma, you're up.
For Cass, I think the most, not surprising is not the right word, but unexpected development with her character is, while I did choose Phantom to be her subclass, her association with death as a whole, I knew a part of her would be her mother's death and how she was dealing with that internally or externally with how she expressed it to her friends and such. But it's the whole matter of her dying, Cassia herself dying, Koru getting in trouble all the time, Cedric dying, and these allies that they've all gathered and then have ultimately passed. I never expected it to be such a fundamental part of her. When I picked Wunngrenad to be her home, it was very much life and nature and rebirth kind of thing, instead of this complete opposite that I thought wouldn't even be that big of a significance, but it is.
Yes, I have noticed the kind of significance with Cassia and death, obviously, because I have planned it. But there's also what I think really interesting is that Bagdan is the god of life, but is also the god of the cycle, and he doesn't take pleasure in that part of his role, but as you've seen from him. But it is a very important part of what he does, is the guiding of spirits to, what he tries to do is the guiding of spirits to the other side. Important distinction there. Thank you very much for your answer. Nikki, you're up.
The most unexpected thing
Is the boots.
No, I always expect you to fuck me over, Vinny.
Yeah, that's true.
I think for me as a player, I've certain small things have developed over time. as I mentioned, the kind of softening of Luca's character. Part of that is like the way he thinks of his own experiences. Um, I was not expecting necessarily the journey to be so centered on the idea of corrupt authority that was part of Luca's backstory. The idea of people abusing their power over you. And I think that led to much more quickly coming to terms with the people who had hurt him in his head and realizing that there would be no reconciliation. So like I thought that when he finally met the person who had hurt him, that Luca would be still kind of reluctant to blame them, almost like he still felt like he'd kind of been the one that fucked up. And I think now he fully understands that that he has been wronged, and I think that's entirely down to his relationship with the party and their experiences with other people trying to control them. Um, I also wasn't expecting how his relationships with the party worked out. In some ways, like he ended up being kind of, a teacher to Willa in some ways, but in many ways, Willa ended up teaching him. And I think Cassia at the start, Luca kind of sensed, okay, you kind of have things figured a bit more out than these two. And that's mostly stayed the same, but I think with Cassia, he also they're not as similar as he thought. I think that Cassia definitely has better balanced the kind of logical and emotional decision making than Luca has. I think that's something that he's kind of aspired to figuring out. And then how much Luca has ended up relating to Asterisk, especially in the most recent times. Initially thinking of her more as kind of like Willa, just someone he had a mentor, and now understanding that in the same way that he's ended up in a body that he doesn't really have control over, agency over in the way he'd like, and that he doesn't associate with in the way that he should. In some ways, that's the same with Asterisk, and in some other ways, what he had taken for granted as just being how Asterisk was in fact Asterisk having that problem, but with her own mind. And I think now he kind of understands more what she was going through than he did before. I think that's probably the most surprising relationship to me, is how the way Luca thinks about Asterisk has developed. And I think the main thing stopping her from changing is that a lot of his most toxic behaviors, he still has a part of him that says, like, it's important for me to do this because it protects everyone else. This is for them. And I think it's very easy when you have toxic behaviors like that to pull back that second step of, well, I'm doing this thing that's harmful to me because it's for the good of other people. And I think that's a hurdle he still hasn't got over.
A very good answer. And last up, Hillary.
Yes. I think the most surprising thing that Willow went through in terms of growth is forgiving Tyvain. I didn't think she would ever have done that. But it was sort of just in that moment, like her being so forgiving and kind, that it felt so out of place for her to throw him to the corner just because he didn't know what he was doing. And I think Willa is so empathetic that I should have seen it coming, but I really didn't. And that really defines her character and defines what her issue is in the inability to change, which is that Willa is so loving and understanding of others' shortcomings that even now she still lets a lot of people walk all over her, and is very like, oh, like this person did this bad thing, but I can still forgive them for it. Like they can still change. Like she's almost too giving with her second chances. And I think that one of the most like pertinent moments that we see this in the campaign is like with Gregaria, where this person is obviously very bad, but Willa never like questions her. She sees Gregaria doing these good things and helping her and trusts her. Like even now with the changes that she's gone through, Willa is still very hopeful, and that stops her growth because whenever she meets someone, no matter how bad they are or what they've done, she just wants to help them and heal them and try and find that spark of good in them. And I don't know what's going to happen when she finds someone that she can't bring back to the light.
I think that's a very good analysis of Gregaria as well, as this person who was doing good things around, well, obviously having an ill intent in the background, and those kind of characters can be tricky, especially with the more trusting PCs in the party. What we got next?
Mm-hmm. Next is for Emma and Cassia. Which did you ever expect to be such a hero? It's a cute one.
No, she didn't. Growing up, it might seem like she's used to being kind of a figurehead, not necessarily, but like kind of the center of attention. Like the moment we hit Wunngrenad, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, you're back! Look at this poster of you. Look at this picture of you. This record. Blah blah blah." But she's never. I don't think she's ever liked that spotlight per se. Like she is so grateful for the love that comes with it from home, but she never imagined having her face on a wanted poster, but plastered around the world, just whether it's the head of a revolution or the head of a bunch of murderers, you know? Like, she never imagined that. She's very much a I should stick to the background, kind of help when I can, like, kind of person. So, no, she never expected this at all.
And now she's amazing.
Yeah, we love Cass.
Mm-hmm.
This one kind of follows, it's for everyone, speaking of like expectations, but it's as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Which I can answer for Willow. Willow just wanted to be like Eleni. She always has, she still does. Eleni taught her who she was supposed to be, and the love that Eleni gave her is what Willow looks for in the world and tries to promote with everything that she does.
Then next up is Nikki.
Luca wanted to be an alchemist. Luca, all he ever wanted was to be revered as this healer, someone who could like solve all manner of ailments, make you maybe even better than you were before. He was, you know, that kid that made potions and then he learned how to do it as he grew up. And I think the big crux of who he became is realizing that there were systems in place that were going to stop him from achieving that because of who he was.
Emma?
Growing up before they sold the farm, she just loved the idea of just that being the rest of her life. She loved helping out with her parents and with Aram just around the farm, tending to whatever animals they had, just harvesting, and then when they got the cottage and sold the farm, just helping Elwyn out in the garden and tending to the other plants and such. She just loved the idea of just being a part of her community. Like, there's such a big sense of community and just home in Wunngrenad that she wanted to be a part of for the rest of it. But I think in the back of her mind for a really long time there was that itch of like, she's heard all these stories, like her parent, all the bedtime stories Elwyn told her, Horror told her, just any books Aram read that he would talk about. She's like, ooh, I kind of want to do that, but like this is so warm and safe. So I think her main ambition was, I'm going to stay warm and safe and then just kind of have that dream one day, but just a home buddy.
Monty, I guess you were a child, like, 2 months ago. So,
This is a very interesting question for me because that is still kind of an unknown as to like when I was truly a child, like in a physical form. I think that obviously Narissa and Meridia were set up to be royalty. We were supposed to be queens, and I suppose being referred to as a queen by the beholder, something like that came to fruition. So I would imagine she probably had aspirations and stuck with them, and wanting to maintain that royalty. And I think that kind of shows within the character that she is now as Asterix, where she so desperately wants her voice to be heard. And I think like what she really craves to be in her childlike state that she's in right now um, is simply someone who knows themselves and knows what they want.
definitely. I can see that. I think we've got kind of time for a couple more, Hillary. And then we're going to have to talk about chapter 2.
Yes, I've got three. Yeah, three more.
Okay.
Which this is a fun one. It's kind of sad. It's from Anonymous.
Oh.
But what is your character's greatest weakness or fear, and what would make them give up the fight?
um, I think I'll just jump in first as a couple of NPCs and say that I love that most of my NPCs, their weaknesses are you guys. When you look at Koru, for instance, I think that Cassia actually falling would be enough for him to just put down his blades. I think that for Cedric, he sees you all as kind of like adopted children now, and losing you guys would again kind of be like, what's the point in coming back for the second time then? Meridia clings on to her newfound sister and the rest of you, but especially has that big link to Cassia. Cassia and Asterix, to be fair, because she does kind of fancy Cassia. So that's like a whole thing there. And I think that a lot of the NPCs in Wunngrenad would probably kind of lose hope if Luca died, because they kind of look at Luca as like a leader, so that would be a bit rough. But Monty, why don't you go next?
Lovely. Gosh, greatest fear, I think for Asterix is being alone. She has 600 years of her life unaccounted for, and when she awoke, I think was sort of overcome. I'm tearing up, this is horrible. Sort of overcome with just this sort of empty feeling and having no one and just observing things from the outside. And now that she's sort of like gained friends and people, I think again being alone sort of would break her. Like it is the biggest fear of like not only losing you all, but sort of like again being rejected from a society and having to go out into the woods alone would just sort of like revert her back to her mind wipe state, I think.
A very sad answer. You gonna get the moth? Oh god, the moth is out. This wasn't even me this time. I didn't do this. There it is.
Oh no.
Emma, take us away.
I have a feeling that all of our answers are definitely going to have that bit of losing the party members. But just Cassia basically losing any family member, new or old, especially the party members, and Koru, very, very, very much Koru, would kind of be that last straw in the tiny little paper house that she still has hanging. They are her strength kind of thing. They're what she's here for, what she lives for, basically. So if, like, any party member went down and didn't come back, because right now she's the main one that's died and come back, so I don't think she could handle that loss that all of them have faced with her. And yeah, so that losing a piece of herself in that sense would crush her.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen.
It's all up to you, man.
It's really not. The story's written.
Ugh.
Nikki, you're up.
Luca's biggest weakness is that he uses magic to walk. That's pretty bad. If he's in an anti-magic field long enough, he'll just collapse. So not great, to be honest. But as for what would make him give up, the funny thing about the kind of person Luca is that nothing could happen to him that would make him actually give up on the fight. But there are things that could happen to him that would make him give up on winning/surviving the fight. Luke is the kind of person where losing hope for him is taking more and more suicidal risks until one of them snuffs him out. And I think that, yes, losing the only people he's ever really had other than one who really cared for him would cause him to seek destruction in that way. I also think that the idea that he fully can't fix things in even a small way would destroy Luca, because he's fundamentally a kind of person that seeks to solve problems. And regardless of how terrible the current state of the Ruby City is, there's something within Luca that says that it's his homeland and he has to rescue it from what's gripping it. And he knows the enormity of that task, and he knows that that might not even be possible, but there are people he cares for there. It's a place he cares for, and I think fully realizing it was a lost cause would be like losing Wunngrenad would be for Cassia. It would just be... it would demolish him.
Next up's Hillary.
Oh, I've got like this moth in a death grip, y'all. Oh gosh, this question is so hard for Willa because she's so hopeful. I mean, the only example I can think of in the campaign of when she was hopeless was when the blood moon happened and she couldn't contact Tyvane, and because Willa is very like, she has hope because she knows that there's something greater. She knows there's that greater goodness in the world. And even in that moment when her god and Tyvane was dying, when she reached out, she still got that love from Eleni. And I know that Willa like will always find that love, even if it's just from what she carries within her heart for the people around her. Even if her party members would die, yes, it would hurt her and it would be absolutely devastating, but Willa knows that there's a place for them. She's been there, she's seen at the stars, and she knows that she's gonna live longer than everyone. And in a sense, I think she already knows that you all are gonna be waiting for her no matter what. So she knows that she's always gonna have the people she loves.
That's a very nice answer, Hillary. It's lovely.
Thanks.
Very sad. I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, let me go through our last three and pick my favorite.
Yes.
While you're looking, can I ask one that was on there? Because I didn't realize that we were going to add questions to this.
Okay.
For Willa, what would Willa have done if we'd lost Tyvane? If he died?
I think that Willa would have... This is a hurtful one because it was something I thought might happen, and I actually had planned. Willa would have looked at Luca and said, the next person has to be better, and she would have stepped into that role, and she would have done better.
So ascended to godhood.
I mean, yeah. I think that regardless of whether or not Tyvain had died, Bagdan would have stepped in after the talk that you guys had, so that essence would have been there for someone to take up, and that would have been a permanent exit from the campaign as a whole for that character. And would have been very sad. So I'm quite glad Tyvain's still alive. But it certainly would have
Casual
been interesting.
ascent to godhood, yeah.
Just so many characters keep ascending to godhood. It's fantastic.
I was gonna, when we were recapping the campaign, jokingly say like, well, first of all was this elf dude, and then I became a god.
And now I'm kind of a dick.
And also, I was a brunette, but when I became more of a dick, I became blonde. It was really weird.
Tyvain looks better blonde, it's alright. Okay, you picked the last one there,
No,
Ellie?
I mean, yeah. We'll do one for Vinny. This last one. What was the inspiration for the place names, both Genathan itself and the countries and the gods?
It's a very good question. I have read...
From L.
From Elle, thank you for the question, Elle. I have read so much literature, it kind of hurts and it all kind of gets messed up in my head. Usually for place names, I start by taking a place I love in fiction, and then I start messing around with the words. You know, you've got the Ruby City, obviously being a riff off the Wizard of Oz, and the Emerald City, and you know, you've got Brim. I love the name Brim. It's short and to the point and definitely gives off stout dwarf vibes. Missouro sounds magical, and I just really love that Uro sound, so it could have been anything. When I first was making the world, it was initially Bazuro and it was meant to be like bizarre, and I was like, no, that's two on the head, so I'll change it across. Port Millar was one of the only ones that I didn't really think about all that much. It was the first place that I had in the world, and I'd made it for a one shot that I was planning to run anyway, of this pirate cove, and I was like, I like that name, and the world of Genathan kind of went around it. I think that I spend a lot of time in fantasy generators, taking fantasy generation and then just turning them into my own. The names of gods are a little different. You know, Azure obviously just being the ocean, it was kind of a no-brainer for me, and Solar being the moon. I believe that celestial and that kind of moonly body is a very common trope, and I love that trope, so I took it. I've always thought that the kind of god of the Warforged would be this intangible or unknowable being, and calling them the Reliquary was great for that. And then you've got Ziri, who had to be kind of arcane, and that sounds arcane. And then you've got the fact that a lot of these guys were adventurers that I already planned for the campaign. So, like Sickle, for instance, was this dwarf warrior that I had made as a character myself, who was originally a farmer and was found as a baby on a farm, and had basically been named after the nearest tool on the farm, and that's why they call them Sickle. And I loved that as a character, and so when I was picking out gods, most notably Bagdan and Sickle were those two gods, and Silgoth, they were actual NPCs that I had made, and I just loved them so much I put them into godhood. I don't think this was really part of the question, but as in inspiration of the world, you know, I read a lot of I read a lot and I play a lot, and there's the game Divinity Original Sin 2 that I love a lot, and it is a big inspiration on this campaign, especially in the kind of what are gods bit of the campaign. But there's going to be a lot more twists and turns, and I read a lot of Percy Jackson too, you know, so you know that's where all the gay stuff comes from. Thank you very much for the question. Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit about chapter 2, but I think maybe we should take a short 2-minute break. What do you guys think? We're probably only gonna be on for another half an hour to an hour.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a very short break.
Oh gosh. Uh-huh.
know.
The greatest weakness, one of my... Okay, well...
Yeah, it's time to cry. I'm like,
God.
cool. Yeah, I'm gonna go grab more water because I ran out. I have an upstairs now, so I get to go downstairs. So if I disconnect from the call, that's why.
My teeth are chattering from the Red Bulls. Why did I do this?
The bees.
Look,
Kind of Red Bull.
It's the dragon fruit one. I was at Walmart and I was
There's a
like,
Dragon
I'm just
fruit
gonna-
one?
oh, baby, is there. Yeah, it's so good. I was at Walmart because I was like, I'm gonna get myself an ice cream bar as a treat because I got a job offer that I wanted. So I was like celebrating.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. And it was like at the corner aisle, you know, they always get you on like the caps, and it was like 2 for $5, and I was like, I could do it. I grabbed 2. And I drank
there's
both of them.
Dragon fruit.
They're
I
so
have to
good.
look for that
It's the green one.
green. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Time to finally talk about chapter 2.
Exciting.
Yes, no spoilers, but we'll be talking about your guys' expectations of chapter 2, things you guys would like to see, and then I'll be telling you, well, what to expect, I guess, from chapter 2. Oh.
By the way, I got a model for one of the players in my home game, and it only recently occurred to me that it's also a Cassia model.
Oh, hey!
Oh,
Wait, it's not loading. Let me see. Oh, of course, Discord makes you go away the moment I try and blow
She
it
is
up,
a tiefling ranger, so slightly different.
Oh. Nah, Cassie uses a bow, so that
Yeah.
That
oh,
works.
that's so cute.
that's adorable.
I love it.
That's Rowan, right?
Yeah, that's Ron, Elle's character. I got a few characters in Hero Forge recently. I got Leanne's character Pavel. It's this little goblin bard. Sweet boy. I got Kellen, who is one of the main NPCs in my campaign. He is the son of Fantasy Hitler. He's not having a good time of it, you know.
No,
He
he's
was the
not.
son of the Black Razor, undead warlord who is trying to destroy the world.
No big.
No
He's
biggie.
very important in both campaigns, but in different ways, because in one of them, the party accidentally left him to die, and he's now a villain. So in one campaign, he's helping the good guys, in one campaign, he's one of the main bad guys.
Oh my god.
That's spicy. I like it.
Yeah. It was very intense. Our ranger chose, not Rowan, but our other ranger, chose his animal companion being, you know, not abandoned over the safety of the rest of the party, and it was Kellen that ended up taking the hit.
Oh.
It was very intense.
Yeah. Anyway, time to talk about chapter 2. Super excited for this chapter where we actually get into the story, which sounds bad until you consider that we have 5 months of getting into the actual story of the campaign. This has basically all been a prologue, to be entirely honest, and now we're starting to really hammer into it. So, obviously, you guys have got some big things right on the horizon. You've got the war in Wunngrenad. You've got all the cult stuff that's happening over in Indara, the possibility of war with Kapofu, and the fact that you guys are still wanted by Airman Industries, who are currently coming across the water. That's a whole thing as well as some of the lesser things like the things that are happening around Wunngrenad with your friends and Finn and all of that. And now Rin is there with his bag of little late teens, early 20s ragtag group. I think before I go into my tirade of what to expect, we'll go around and say, what do you guys think you're expecting? Crazy conspiracy theories are welcome, but absolutely don't have to if you don't want to. And I think we'll start with Hillary.
Oh, the conspiracy theorist. That's me. Well, I definitely think there's something funky going on with Abinaya because Baghdad was all like sus about it. And when I asked him about it, he never answered me about what happened. He just glossed over it, and I'm like, apparently Rin has seen her. I don't know what's going on. I definitely think the Kapofu stuff is gonna hit for Willa, considering that like she's the one with the crown now. Like they're gonna be like, hey, there it is, go get her. Not so much a theory, but what I'm most excited for is now that all of the sort of like are back, like Varu and Prid. I know I gave you some NPCs, and I'm really hoping I get to see some of them because I love them all so dearly, except for the one that the one is bad. I did give you a villain. But other than that one, like, I want to meet them so bad. I want to give them a surprise from behind hug and just be like, I missed you. Look at my new armor. Did you miss me? It'll be fun.
That will be very fun. I am excited for more bonding in the times coming up to the Great War, and some cute moments maybe before the bloodshed. After you, it is Nikki.
Oh boy. There's a lot of things. Obviously, the campaign has so many threads that I'm interested in seeing where they lead. I really want to find out more about the Titans. I want to see where that's all leading. I have a suspicion. One of my current personal conspiracy theories is that Lucas' blood magic is somehow related to the Titans, because of it being like an ancient art, and also I think that those little maybe blood magic user bug men that we met might be related to the Titans as well. I don't know, because we've seen them. They're Titan adjacent. Yeah, so I'm definitely interested in that. I think figuring out the whole like relationship between all the gods is gonna be interesting. The main thing I'm looking forward to is eventually ending up in the Ruby City, because it so informs Luca's character, and we've now been to everyone else's homelands at least once, and I think there's a lot of buried shit that's there for Luca, and it would be interesting to be in one of our homes, and other than it to be like a home that's been corrupted, or like the Ruby City's always been kind of fucked up, so it's a home that Luca has a very complex relationship with, instead of it being a place that he has a lot of warmth toward. So I'm looking forward to that.
I'm definitely looking forward to showing you guys the different side of the Ruby City than the other party saw, because they were obviously over in the rich sector of the Ruby City quite often, and you guys will be hanging out probably on the outskirts and in the slumbery parts for more of it, and that's going to be super interesting. I'll get to show off a lot of my horror stuff over there, and yes, that's going to be very fun. Thank you for that.
But we get one gala.
Yes, one gala. Yeah. There's
one
a gala.
Even if we all have to steal the identities of several rich people to get in.
I actually
one gala.
I actually have 3 galas planned for you guys. Don't worry. just in case you don't get round all three. So there's probably only going to be two. So I planned three that you guys could go to.
Oh wait, I'm gonna guess Ruby City and Darren Gala. I don't know where the third one would be.
Brim,
Laura, we're not going
obviously.
back to Port
Brim.
La.
Brim for King's Day. You're gonna. If you guys ever make it to Brim, you can have a gala on the
Oh.
ice. It's gonna be.
What about an underwater gala?
Oh shit! Maybe there's four then.
Yes.
Yeah, if you guys ever go to
I would
Aquarius.
It's a good thing I've been
8
saving my
months. Yeah,
To get
8 months and 24 sessions. And I still haven't gotten my gala session. I'm like, where is it?
I am sorry. Thank you, Nikki. After that, we have Emma.
What I'm most looking forward to, definitely hitting Ruby City. I'd want to go everywhere on the map, so Brim as well. But Ruby City being a part of Luca's past as a party member, and just kind of being the main antagonist for this entire time since we slaughtered Lance, is something that I honestly constantly think about. I can't wait to get to Ruby City. I'm so excited for it. But definitely seeing how we hopefully clean up Wunngrenad is another thing that I can't wait to do, because it has been through a lot, and it's Cassia's home, so, and all the other characters I believe have found home in it. And I just want to kind of put the puzzle back together there so badly. Just put the band-aid on it really bad. Can't wait. But yeah, just going back through the map and kind of rethreading what we've kind of scattered through, because we've ran through a lot of stuff and then jumped back somewhere else. So I'm anticipating the cleanup kind of work that we're gonna do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We'll come back to that. I've got things to say about that. We're going to come back to that. But Monty, you're up.
Yeah. I think just right off the bat, I think there's a lot of really interesting character developments going on for everyone right now. Sort of the like hinting at Dark Cassia and like seeing Cassia's mom a little bit is a storyline that I'm very interested in, and I look forward to seeing how that shapes up. Willa in dealing with getting closer to Tyvain and sort of Tyvain sort of straightening out. I'm interested to see how that relationship develops further as Tyvain possibly continues to be sort of a respectable god now, and like what that looks like going forward. And then of course, like Emma said, going to the Ruby City, kind of seeing Luca in his element and like getting deeper into where he's from and sort of like finding that common understanding of like what's going on there. To go to a place that is currently untouchable on the map to us. I think personally, looking forward, I have a lot of unknowns about my character, because I did just sort of throw you a character and go, here, use her for plot, which I have absolutely loved, and I felt so much agency in. But now we're getting to the point where I'm being fed bits of information, and I want to meet my mom. I want to like know all about what's going on there. I want to go to the underwater city, and I want to just sort of like get immersed into everything I don't know about my character yet and see where that shapes up. There's so many things where I'm like, I've just been told this. Somebody just called me a queen, and I don't know what the fuck you mean. So I would like to know what that means, please. Yep.
There's definitely a lot of that, yeah. And I'm very excited to be going through Astra's backstory, because it allows me to show off Aquarius, the underwater city, and gonna be able to look at the strike force. And I hadn't even thought about underwater gala, but I think that's a fantastic idea. So absolutely, that sounds great. I think Meridia would definitely be welcomed there with a gala. I want to talk a little bit about what you should be expecting from chapter 2, and that's that this part is definitely going to be the part where the Eldritch Horror part of the campaign really starts to spike. We've already gone through our lists of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and I've made sure to tailor it to that. But certainly, as the story progresses and we talk more about gods, titans, the souls of the lost and the damned, and Silgoth, we start to reel more into infernal horror, eldritch horror, and not really being able to trust what's around you. As well as that, we obviously have a lot of exploration, and we're going to be going around all the different places. But first we have the war. The main thing I have to say about the war is that there are odds, there are chances you don't win. Because it's the Ruby City, and they're the strongest force in the world. They're coming at you with many ships, and your allies are just now coming together and are not trained for this kind of warfare. You don't even know a bunch of them that well. This is certainly going to be an act, a chapter of losses and wins, of betrayals and heartbreaks alongside new allies and new connections. It's going to be a lot about exploration of the self, while also being a lot about exploration of the world, and again, what it means to be a god. I would say that you should be prepared to retreat at times, and that is certainly going to be something that comes up a couple of times in this chapter, where the odds against you are so insurmountable that sure, you can do a fighting retreat, and there's always going to be plenty of honour in that, but some fights you just can't win. I'm going to try my absolute hardest not to kill off some of the favourite NPCs. However, the way things are written out right now, there are some losses already possible because of the way that things have played out. I am deeply hoping that things won't play out exactly how they currently do in my predictions, but if they do, then I trust that you will all be able to muster up vengeance rather than defeat. Obviously, we've got such great things right now as Cora's got his new spine, Meridia's got her new leg. So you do have powerful allies on your side, and your gem can teleport you anywhere. So that's a good mode of retreat. But at this point, we're looking less at consequences of the party and looking more at consequences to the outer world. What does it mean if you guys lose Wunngrenad, for instance? Not just to Wunngrenad, but to the fact that Tywin has sent all his troops to Wunngrenad. And so now that means that Indara is lost too. There's a domino effect here. Be careful who you ally yourself with, and be more careful who you make enemies of. Because there are very powerful figures now in the fold as you guys are getting more and more powerful. You're certainly heroes of the realms now, and everybody kind of knows you and knows what you're doing, but now you're starting to get more in touch with more powerful entities, and that's going to be issues going forward. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say, I think. As far as chapter 2 goes, in terms of theme, this is really where we start hammering home the thematic part of the gods and like what the gods even are, and really start going back a bit in time to the first domino effect that probably caused a real effect on this world, which was the death of Eleni, and how that has caused probably most of this campaign. So that'll be great. That'll be great fun. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add? No? Perfect. Then I think I declare this recap session over. We're going to be doing some other things. We're going to be working on some content together, like character introductions and stuff, and probably a fun recap that we all kind of mix together. And we're going to be making sure we upload the episodes for Chapter 2 onto YouTube, and we're going to start fresh from Chapter 2, so we've got everything going from there. So, thank you those of you who joined us. I think there was actually quite a lot of you at one point, but, you know, as these things go, people dwindle in and out. But it was great having you all here. It was great answering your questions, and I am so looking forward to Chapter 2.
Thank you all.
Goodbye, everyone. We love you.
Goodbye.